I need you to sit with this number for a second. $2.3 billion. That is how much in real-world assets now lives on the XRP ledger as of early 2026. $2.3 billion, up from $991 million at the start of the year. That means the XRP ledger added more tokenized assets in the first 2 months of 2026 than it did in all of 2025 combined. And the number before that? XRPL tokenization grew 2,200% in 2025 alone, from 24.7 million all the way to 567 million. And what is XRP's price doing? Sitting at around $1.33, down 40% year to date, down 63% from its all-time high. Nobody is talking about this disconnect, and once you understand it fully, including both why the growth is real and why the price has not followed yet, you are going to have one of the clearest pictures of the XRP investment thesis that exists in any video on the internet right now. Let us start with what is actually on the ledger, because this is where the story gets genuinely surprising. The largest single contributor to XRPL's 2026 tokenization explosion is JMWH. It is a digital asset representing 1 megawatt-hour of energy backed by Latin American energy companies issued by Just Token. It added $861 million to XRPL when it launched in mid-January. That is a single token, one issuer, $861 million. And it has 12 holders. 12, not 12,000, 12 individual wallet addresses. Now, before that number makes you skeptical, I want you to understand what it actually tells you about the stage of adoption we are in right now. This is how institutional finance works at its earliest stage. Companies do not open up secondary markets on day one. They record assets on a blockchain for lifecycle management, reconciliation, and compliance tracking before they open up trading. JMWH is plumbing. It is internal infrastructure. The 12 holders are the institution and its counterparties, not a retail marketplace. And that is exactly what early institutional infrastructure looks like before it becomes the backbone of something much larger. The rest of the $2.3 billion breaks down across several categories that are distinctly not plumbing. U.S. Treasury products from Ondo Finance, Guggenheim, and Open Eden now total $300 million on the XRP ledger. Ondo's short-term government bond fund alone grew 293% since January of this year. These are products that real institutional investors are buying. Control Alt's tokenized diamond collections added $189 million. Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin holds $348 million on the XRPL side alone, having grown by $113 million in just the first 2 months of the year. Now, let me walk you through the institutional name drops, because this is where holders need to slow down and actually absorb what is happening. Société Générale, one of France's largest banks, launched its Euro stablecoin UERCV on the XRP ledger, making XRPL only the third blockchain to host this MiCA-compliant token after Ethereum and Solana. A $1.8 trillion European bank chose the XRP ledger, not because they were experimenting, because it passed their compliance, technical, and operational assessment. Aviva Investors, one of the UK's largest asset managers, announced a tokenization partnership with Ripple. The stated goal is introducing institutional-grade utility to the ledger through tokenized fund structures in 2026. Alastair Sewell from Aviva Investors and Ripple's own team are scheduled to appear at XRP Community Day specifically to discuss how they intend to integrate conventional finance with the XRP ledger. SBI Holdings, one of Japan's largest financial institutions and a company that has held roughly 9% of Ripple since 2016, issued a $65 million on-chain bond on XRPL that offered XRP rewards to Japanese retail investors. That's the first tokenized securities offering of its kind in Japan's regulated market. Not a pilot, a live product in a regulated market with actual Japanese retail investors holding it. Deutsche Bank integrated Ripple's technology stack for cross-border payments. MasterCard settled real credit card transactions through RLUSD on the XRP ledger. The Monetary Authority of Singapore's Bloom Sandbox, one of the most exclusive regulatory testing programs in global finance, selected Ripple and its RLUSD stablecoin for a trade finance automation pilot alongside Unlock, which operates in 36 countries and supports over $200 billion in supply chain assets. And Arcax, a UK-regulated digital securities exchange, has a public commitment to bring $1 billion in tokenized assets onto the XRP ledger by mid-2026. Arcax already tokenized access to Aberdeen's £3.8 billion liquidity fund on XRPL. The $1 billion target is not a wish, it's a stated, documented public goal from a regulated entity that has already demonstrated it can deliver. XRPL now ranks second globally in 30-day real-world asset growth, behind only Arbitrum, and has surpassed Solana, Polygon, and Avalanche in total on-chain tokenized value. It accounts for roughly 15% of the entire global tokenized commodities market. Tokenized commodities on XRPL specifically expanded from $111 million to $1.14 billion in 2026 alone. XRPL hit a record 7.7 million non-empty wallets, its highest in its 13-year history in a down market. Daily transactions crossed 2.7 million, a 12-month high, while the price was actively declining. So why is the price not moving? This is the question that every single data point in this video demands you answer, and I'm going to give you the honest version because you deserve it. Here is the structural disconnect that analysts have identified and that most YouTube videos will not tell you. Most of what is recorded on XRPL right now is what RWA.XYZ calls represented assets, not distributed assets. Represented means recorded on-chain for internal lifecycle management, compliance tracking, and reconciliation. They cannot be freely transferred between unrelated wallets. They are not circulating in an open secondary market. Distributed assets are the ones that can move between wallets, that trade on secondary markets, that create the kind of liquid demand that pushes the token price. Of XRPL's 2.3 billion, approximately 1.49 billion sits in represented assets. That's digital record-keeping at institutional scale. It validates the infrastructure. It does not yet create the kind of open market demand that moves the XRP price. The second structural factor is fee mechanics. XRPL transaction fees cost roughly 0.00001 XRP per transaction, 100,000 transactions for one XRP. Total fee burn since the ledger launched in 2012 add up to around 14 million XRP total, which is 0.014% of the total supply. Even at 2.7 million daily transactions, the fee channel simply doesn't generate enough demand pressure to be the price catalyst on its own. The third factor is that most institutional settlement on XRPL happens in RLUSD, not XRP directly. Institutions use RLUSD as the settlement currency because it's stable. XRP is used for transaction fees, which are a fraction of a cent. 92% of trades on XRPL's decentralized exchange already pair through XRP, which means it's the bridge, but DEX daily volume currently sits between $4 and $8 million. Meaningful for a DeFi platform, not yet meaningful enough to create the supply squeeze that moves a token trading at multi-billion-dollar market cap. So here's the question that defines the entire thesis. What closes the gap? The answer analysts point to is the transition from represented to distributed. When institutional assets on XRPL move from internal record-keeping to open secondary markets, the holder count stops being 22 and starts being thousands. When Arcax delivers its $1 billion commitment and those assets become actively tradable on XRPL's DEX, the daily volume number changes dramatically. When the Clarity Act passes and institutional compliance teams get the statutory certainty they need to deploy XRP as an actual bridge asset in live on-demand liquidity corridors, rather than just holding it as a reserve, the demand mechanics change structurally. McKinsey projects tokenized securities and funds could reach $2 to $4 trillion by 2030. BCG estimates up to $16 trillion. Even if XRPL captures 3 to 5% of that market, with XRP genuinely functioning as the bridge asset at scale, the liquidity math required to support those flows implies a token price dramatically higher than $1.33. That's not wishful thinking. That's the arithmetic of liquidity pools. When an asset serves as the bridge currency for trillions in settlement value, the market cap of that bridge asset has to be large enough to handle the flows without excessive slippage. But here's where the honest version of this story matters most. The gap between where XRPL's infrastructure is today and where that math requires it to be is still significant. The current state is institutional adoption of the infrastructure. The next phase is institutional adoption of the asset. Those are two different things, and they happen on different timelines. The infrastructure adoption is already documented and accelerating. The asset adoption depends on the Clarity Act locking in XRP's commodity status permanently, the ARCHAC's $1 billion commitment converting from plumbing to open secondary market, the RLUSD ecosystem maturing to the point where on-demand liquidity at scale requires XRP as the bridge in live banking corridors, and the broader tokenization market scaling from billions to trillions. What this means for XRP holders right now is actually simpler than most people make it. The infrastructure case is documented and real. 2.3 billion in tokenized assets on XRPL, a European bank that manages 1.8 trillion choosing the ledger, Aviva Investors, SBI, Deutsche Bank, MasterCard, and the Singapore Central Bank Sandbox all engaged with the ecosystem simultaneously. That does not happen to projects without genuine institutional credibility. The institutions are not speculating, they are building. The price case requires the next phase of that build-out, where represented assets become distributed, where DEX volume grows by an order of magnitude, where the Clarity Act converts regulatory guidance into permanent statutory protection that no future administration can reverse. Those catalysts are scheduled, documented, and moving. None of them have fully arrived yet, and that is precisely why the price is where it is, not because the project failed, but because the market is pricing in the delay between infrastructure adoption and asset adoption. The 2.3 billion is real. The price disconnect is also real. The question you have to answer for yourself is whether you believe the gap closes. If this video gave you the complete picture instead of just the highlight reel, hit the like button right now. It is how this reaches the people who need both sides of the story before they make a decision. Subscribe if you want every major XRPL tokenization update broken down with the same level of detail the moment it drops, because 2026 is the year this gap either closes or gets wider, and you want to be watching it in real time. Here is your comment question. Do you think the XRP price reacts to the RWA numbers before or after the Clarity Act passes? Drop your reasoning below. That debate is more important than most people realize. And if you know someone holding XRP who keeps asking why the fundamentals are not moving the price, send them this video today, because context is everything, and most people only have half the picture. Stay informed, stay positioned, stay ahead of the story.